As Unitarian Universalists, we're usually pretty good at doubting things. Plato once said, the truth is in the paradox. If you are not seeing the paradox, you are not seeing the whole truth. Well, this is a challenge to us to look further and look deeper, look at all sides and no side at all. Think outside the box and question even if there is a box. So consider the quote from our reading which says, "A belief which may not be questioned binds us to error, for there is incompleteness and perfection in every belief." That gives us a path of never-ending questioning, just like Maria Mitchell. I have been questioning my beliefs about the notion of God for at least 3 decades or more, possibly more. When I went to seminary, I figured I should at least have a solid understanding of my own beliefs. You would think that would be wise. It caused me a fair amount of angst being in seminary and not knowing what to think or say about the ever-important notion of God. Is there a God or isn't there? How many gods or goddesses are there? What is the nature of God? Somehow it seemed logical that if I was to have a degree of Master of Divinity, I should somehow know these things. On the one hand, the notion of God seemed a bit ridiculous. There were the usual childish definitions and descriptions of God that made absolutely no sense to me. I simply could not buy into some old guy in the sky watching and judging our every move to measure out if we deserved to go to heaven or not. And there were other concepts of God that did make more sense, though. Notions that there is something beyond oneself, something beyond ordinary, observable reality. Some unifying force, some loving presence somehow seemed to ring true. Clearly there is much more beyond me, and there is much more to our existence than just what we can see. But is that God? And yet, the worldview of my dad, the scientist and science teacher, also seemed incomplete. He told me that science had all the answers and that religion was nothing more than old superstition. Well, I could see how he was right in many ways, but it just didn't seem like the whole story either, and I had my doubts. I probably had doubts because he taught me to question everything. He taught me to use the scientific method and always keep looking for a deeper answer. In fact, I suspect my whole spiritual, religious explorations began in elementary school when my dad began asking me, "Dana, what is real?" What a dad. "Well, what do you mean, Dad? I mean, real is all that we can see around us." "How do you know?" Exasperated and confused, I answered, "I know because I can hear it and see it and taste it and feel it." "Can you prove that it's real?" "Dad, it's not pretend." "Are you sure?" "How do you really know?" Here was the beginning of doubt and the long path of widening my perspective over my lifetime. Little did I know that I would be confronted with the same questions during seminary when studying the work of the great 18th century philosopher Immanuel Kant. Kant's questioning of what is real led him to observe that everything we see and experience in life is filtered through ourselves, our physical perceptions and our cultural perspectives. So we are shaped by reality, which causes us to shape our perception of reality since the moment we are born. Welcome to the world, Dominic. So we can never fully experience anything from a purely objective experience, just as it is. Did y'all follow that? Kant explains, it always remains a scandal of philosophy and the universal human reason that the existence of, let me try that again. This is Immanuel Kant. Quote, it always remains a scandal of philosophy and universal human reason that the existence of things outside us should have to be assumed merely on faith, and that if it occurs to anyone to doubt it, we should not be able to answer him with satisfactory proof. This was my dad's whole point. How do you know? In other words, the observer is always a part of the equation, and we can never get out of our own heads to experience objective reality. This is why any source of wisdom, whether it is science or religion or philosophy or an astute observation of a child, it is only wisdom if it resonates with our own inner perceptions and experience. In seminary, whenever anyone put forth some notion about God for some reason, I felt compelled to argue the opposite viewpoint. I still do. Anyhow, any definition was simply too limiting. One moment, I was mostly convinced that I did believe in something I would call God, and another moment, I was pretty much convinced that there was no such thing. So maybe God is just a human construct. Well, that makes sense. We, as humans, commonly experience the world from a dualistic perspective, with good and bad, right and wrong, us and them. And life is quick to teach us that we are not in control of how things work out. Anybody learn that lesson? Yeah. So there must be something else out there beyond ourselves, causing things to happen to us and causing life to feel out of control. This something else needs a name, so let's call it God. This particular word, God, that we use in our English language comes from German. And as we know, there's a long list of other names of God. Some are male, others female, others neuter or neither, from all the faith traditions from all around the world and from the past. But what do these God names mean? If these God concepts and words are just a human construct made up from our imagination, then on some level, isn't everything just a human construct? Isn't every word just an auditory symbol that we have assigned to things so that we can communicate by using language? Chair, carpet, piano. Seeing this combination of wood makes me, I might want to call it a pulpit or a podium. But those are just words that are a human construct. A chair, it's just wood put together, but we call it a chair. I don't need to believe in it or not, but I do have faith that it will hold me up, however. Clearly throughout time, people all around the world have been having spiritual experiences and trying to put them into words that ultimately fall short of what they are trying to explain because they are describing something that is indescribable and beyond words, just as Immanuel Kant was telling us. Perhaps the word God is just shorthand for that which is indescribable. One must experience it for oneself. So religious words and labels, treatises, myths, and sutras can only point the seeker in the right direction. It can't replace the experience. Kant was right. We must experience reality and make sense of it from within our own skin. So, let me tell you about the peach and the onion. For some of us, we have a theology that is like a peach. At the very center, there is a core. There is some center of existence, the center of reality. It might be defined in many different ways, and it may be indefinable. But there is something there. In Hinduism, this would be called the Atman, or the self with a capital S. Not individual selves, but the big, unified, we're all in this together self, Atman. This is the perspective of one supreme organizing intelligence, a unifying force which we are all a part of, that could be called God. Then there are some of us who have a theology that is more like an onion. There are many layers of insight and understanding, but when you peel back layer after layer after layer, eventually there is absolutely nothing at the center. In Buddhism, this would be called anatman, or no self. This is the perspective of no God or no supreme organizing intelligence in the universe. Now, as I wrestled with all of this, I realized that any definition I tried to pin down that which is both within and beyond myself just simply would not work. It would be incomplete and inaccurate. So in that regard, I don't believe in God. But I can't be completely convinced that there is nothing beyond what my senses perceive, because reality is so unfathomably vast that I am convinced that in some way it is all interconnected. I do experience the deep mystery of life that weaves us all together throughout all of time, past, present, and future. I have no doubt that we are star stuff. We are each a movement, a motion, a unique sound blending with all of the other sounds that have ever occurred or will ever occur. And we are all together in the greatest, most grandest, ever unfolding symphonies called life. So is this God? Well, no. I mean, yes. I mean, well, that question just doesn't make any sense anymore. You see, yes and no, I simultaneously believe in God and do not believe in God equally, and neither can be true if the other is untrue. And oh, how I have looked forward to sharing this paradox with you. So you can understand my sheer delight when I was taught the deeper definition of the word Allah, the most important Arabic name for God. In English, we just translate it as God, imposing all of our own baggage onto that word. But Allah is a mere image of itself. Al, A-L, and La, L-A. Allah means yes. Okay, Al means yes or affirmative. And La, its opposite meaning is no or negative. Allah actually means the yes-no of all reality. Allah, yes-no of all reality. Exactly what I've been saying! The truth is in the paradox. It is both a particle and a wave. It is the Tao that cannot be named and the 10,000 things. It is the great mystery that transcends our dualistic perceptions, the Atman and the Anatman together. It isn't one or the other, it is both and all. Yet even now, language limits this understanding because I have to refer to it as it, or something. So it is something, and it is nothing simultaneously. Now please understand, I am not trying to convince any of you of anything with these theological ponderings. In fact, I delight in knowing that we have a church full of many different points of view. And isn't that wonderful? What rich conversations we could have if we all shared our doubts and our questions. As our 7 principles remind us, it is up to each of us to pursue our own search for truth and meaning. And there is no one truth that we must all believe. Thank God. The God that we may or may not believe in, of course. That we are all free to think for ourselves, and it is not my job as a Unitarian Universalist minister to tell anyone what to believe. So why even bring all this up? There is something within us that longs for integrity. We seek a congruence between our inner and our outer reality. We find wholeness through the freeing of our soul, which is diminished by lies and deceit and misconceptions, and is strengthened and set free by big, bold truth that we know deep in our bones, and that is ever unwinding and revealing to us. And yet it is easy to accidentally sacrifice our soul's integrity in the attempt to be nice, and to avoid talking about God and theology and beliefs, to avoid searching for our own truth and meaning because we don't want to risk offending someone who doesn't think or believe the same that we may think or believe. And besides, it takes a lot of work to plumb our inner depths and our outer world to gain a perspective of our own beliefs that truly resonate with our own experience of life. Often it is easier to just be sure about what we don't believe and leave it at that. But what a soul-impoverishing space to be in. So we are here in this religious community to give each other the space to ponder openly in conversation our doubts. And we need this space because leaving an old belief system behind, such as a religion that does tell you what to believe and where there are certain teachings, for a life that is filled with doubt and questioning, that can feel like waking up to a world that no longer makes any sense. It can feel like all the meaning for living has evaporated and there is nothing to replace it. This is the dark night of the soul, and it can be very painful and depressing. And that is often, my friends, why people walk through our doors. That is the space they are in. We come here as seekers, and we come here sometimes as religious refugees, needing a safe and supportive sanctuary where we can wrestle with our beliefs and our doubts and our emerging questions. We need this community that is willing to listen, converse, challenge, and explore these thoughts and feelings with us as we discern our own understanding of truth and meaning and find our own depth of integrity. We need an environment built on our trust and acceptance where we can lovingly hear perspectives that are quite different from our own. These conversations, and I know many of you have had them in small group ministry and in other times, these conversations can be the most profound, life-changing conversations that we have ever experienced. They can ease away old narratives built on fear. These are conversations that spontaneously heal old wounds of shame. These are the conversations that help us rediscover hope through new beliefs that are congruent with our experience and actually make sense to us. We can fully and wholeheartedly embrace these beliefs because they are life-giving to our souls. Cherish your doubts, my friends, because they are the open door to questioning. And questioning is the crucible of discernment and of clarity. If something seems true to us, it may or may not withstand our most intense questioning. If it is not a truth, it will burn away. If it is a truth, it will be strengthened, and we will be left with clarity and deeper understanding. So I challenge you, and I challenge myself, all of us together, to live our faith more fully by embracing and cherishing and celebrating our doubts and welcoming those questions. Let this be a place of sanctuary for your exploration, grounded in acceptance and welcoming our differences. We each become enriched and transformed. As a big fan of Star Trek, I will end with a quote from the final episode of The Next Generation, All Good Things, written by Brannon Braga. An entity named Q, perhaps you've met him, says, "The Continuum didn't think you had it in you, Jean-Luc, but I knew you did. We wanted to see if you had the ability to expand your mind and your horizons, and for one brief moment, you did." Picard, when I realized the paradox. Exactly. For that one fraction of a second, you were open to options that you never even considered. This is the exploration that awaits you. Not mapping stars and studying nebula, but charting the unknown possibilities of existence. My friends, let's make it so.